Hello and welcome to Car Dealer Live. My name is James Batchelor and today we are taking our monthly look at used car values. And joining me as always is Cap HPI's Director of Valuations, Derren Martin. Hello, Derren.
Hi, James.
Lovely to have you on, Derren. Right, let's get cracking then. January, normally a bit of a quiet month, really, isn't it? Normally, I mean, what's it been looking like from your perspective?
It's certainly not been quiet. I think going into January, there was a bit of trepidation about how the market would be. The dealers weren't stocking up in December. They were being pretty wary, I would say, and there was a little bit of sort of difference of opinion about how strong or otherwise it would be, just because of what's going on in the country with the economy, really, and cost of living, interest rates, all of those sorts of things. So it's actually been a relatively strong month. It's felt, certainly for ICE cars, petrol and diesel cars, it's felt like a pretty normal-ish January, if there is such a thing. Obviously, last year we had sort of the spectre of Omicron still sort of hanging around, and the previous couple of years we've had sort of COVID, other areas of COVID. This year it's clear of all, well, mainly clear of all that, but it's just felt it's felt that people are out buying cars. It's felt that the retail world is healthy. From that weekend of sort of 7th or 8th of January, that sort of first real weekend of the month, dealers were busy. And because of that, they've been out replenishing stock. So it's kind of been, we've started to reduce values in our live products after Christmas. That first week of the month, they were a little bit weaker. But from that first weekend of the 7th and 8th, the market really picked up, and dealers have been back out buying. I wouldn't say they've been buying in bulk, but they've been buying, and certainly, well, they've been buying petrol and diesel cars anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I spoke to Auto Trader a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying exactly the same thing, how demand has been surprisingly high. But of course, you've always got to realise in the used car market that a lot of purchases that people, they're forced purchases. People have to go and buy a used car, and there are fears of the strikes on public transport. There are other elements which are all part of this, really, and it does seem as though we haven't had a normal used car month for years now. There's always something that's influencing it, and that's especially the case in January. Do you think?
Yeah, very much so. There always seems to be something going on, but I think this time around it's probably, yeah, as good as they'd hoped it to be. I think it's been sort of surprisingly buoyant. One of our contacts has said they had some tough targets for January, but I think everyone's achieving them. You're right, it can be a necessity purchase. I think maybe people are downsizing as well. We've seen that cheaper end of the market particularly strong. We've seen that 5 and 10-year-old car, sort of the under £8,000 car, particularly strong. They've been going up in value, a lot of those cars. Dealers that have been trading their cars rather than retailing them have had fantastic results through the auctions. Conversion rates are strong. That gap between an average and a clean car has kind of it widened last year. It feels as though that's sort of coming back a little bit now as well. Just dealers prepared to buy at that cheaper end. Right, that the expensive end is still a little bit more tricky, but that cheaper end is going really well, and sort of up to about £15,000. Sort of 3-year-old cars, it was sort of within that we've put values up in general. Again, I stipulate it's I'm kind of leading you where to ask the questions here, but I'm sure you know it's been strong for petrol and diesel cars, James.
It has been, yeah, and that was going to be my next question, really, because we've had a 0.1% increase in January, and it must be fair to say that if there hadn't been such a large decrease with electric cars, the month would have been even stronger, wouldn't it? And it would have been a pretty unusual month. So, I mean, I suppose it's the fault of EVs, really, isn't it? It's amazing times.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying this for a few months with you, haven't we? We've been coming on these broadcasts and saying that EVs have been under pressure probably since about October time, and that's continued. And I would say it's accelerated in January. There was a lot of bad press over Christmas about taking 2 or 3 hours to charge your car up at motorway service stations. Yeah. The expense involved in charging your car up, particularly if you don't charge at home. But also the main thing is just the cost of those electric vehicles compared to ICE equivalents, internal combustion engine equivalents, is just it's too wide, really. So you can look at a comparable car, and if you go in and buy one, you're probably going to come out of there with a petrol or diesel car, particularly a petrol, I would say. But diesels have been performing well as well. But yeah, the average would have been sort of a bigger movement up, about 0.5% up, rather than 0.1% up, if it hadn't been for EVs. And some of the other alternative fuels have been a little bit weaker than petrol and diesel, but it's EVs that stand out. And we've the data that we've received, the conversion rates are lower, a lot lower at auction. Conversion rates in general, we're hearing the sort of 70-80%. On EVs, they're less than 20%. So there's more cars coming back in. They're expensive, and there's a pushback from the consumer to buy them, which has just kind of been the perfect storm, really, for EV values. And they've just, well, yeah, we've knocked thousands of pounds off some EVs, and it's not really a surprise, I think, and no one is sort of saying, well, what have you done with that, with those vehicles? Usually get the manufacturers knocking on your door, but they all realise what's going on in the market, and that these EVs, to be honest, a lot of them have been overpriced for too long. They've been strong for a long time.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my next question, really, which is, how much of this is just a market correction, and is it too easy to load this dramatic price cuts with wider influences like high energy bills, public transport problems? Is this a big market correction, or is it stronger than we actually were expecting?
I think it's a market correction. We were actually predicting within our forecasts for a lot of our forecasts from a year ago for this to happen. But being honest, we thought it would start earlier, and so be a sort of a longer tail, really. We thought the values would come down as the volumes increased over the course of the year. It's all happened in a short period of time. Model 3, for example, we've knocked a third of the value off that since October, in 4 months. So that's a big chunk of money coming off those. It's just really been, I think it's a correction to the values. It won't last forever. What you really need to get to is a point where the petrol and diesel cars are not that much less than the equivalent EV. If it's £10,000-12,000 more, that's a lot. If it's £1,500 more, £2,000 more, that's a lot more palatable. If you look at the whole life cost of the vehicle, total cost of the ownership, it's still worth getting an EV. If you charge it at home, then it's definitely worth it. If the journey's right for you, then like shorter journeys particularly, or the range works for you, that's fine. But I think with it being winter, people have maybe heard horror stories about the range not being what you'd expect it to be. The range isn't as good in the cold weather. And as I say, the horror stories of 2 or 3 hours to charge your car up. You can't just jump in an EV and head off your 300-mile, 400-mile journey. That you have to think about it, and I don't think we're quite ready for that at the moment in general.
Yeah, because because obviously, like everybody, we all saw those photos in a certain national newspaper of queuing Teslas, and I mean, my feeling of all of that is those kinds of headlines were always going to happen, because we're at that point now where electric cars, it's not just people who have, they're evangelists, they are people who've done their research. We're at that point now where quite a lot of people are considering going electric, and there's a lot of people who aren't quite so well versed on the problems with electric cars. So those kinds of headlines are going to resonate with those kinds of people, and naturally they're just going to flourish, aren't they? So these kinds of headlines and negative talk was always going to happen, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, well, as you get more of them back into the market, as they become a higher proportion of the market, and as people come to change their cars, honestly, you're going to look to change to an EV. You're going to consider it. Yeah. So you're going to do your homework on it. As the proportions have got bigger, so it's down to volume as well. Why the values have dropped so much, because there's a lot of them out there. The proportion, so volume wise, we got about 800% more data on EVs than we had in 2018. So 4 years, 800%. It's a huge increase. There's more of them there, and yeah, the consideration from the consumer, the cost of living concerns. You worry about it, charging it up. You worry about the cost of the vehicle, and then you worry about the the range anxiety, which is still a thing. So it's just kind of been a perfect storm. But as I say, they will come. You'll get there. You'll get to a point where they become attractive again, financially attractive, and also as you head into sort of maybe warmer weather, the range thing will go away. The charging network does need to improve, but I do think that we're not a million miles away either from getting closer to those values. You're already starting to see sort of Tesla Model 3s less than £30,000 for some used examples. Once you're getting down to those sort of levels, then you'll have there'll be consideration again. People still want to drive a Tesla, so they will even though there's a lot of them coming back, they will sell at a price.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Demand is still there for EVs, but it's understandable that some dealers are feeling cautious about stocking EVs at the moment, though. I mean, that's a natural sentiment, isn't it?
Yeah, well, just because they take longer to sell, through auction. We see the auction stats takes something like 27 days to sell an EV, takes something like 11 days to sell a petrol or diesel car. And then the same on the forecourts, it takes longer to sell an EV, especially if you've got a lot of them. So we've got it on good authority that there's buying bans from some retailers, quite a number of retailers. They're just being really wary about buying EVs. So they're diving in for petrol and diesel cars, but not for EVs. There's leasing companies that are putting them on a secondary lease, just hanging on to them, keeping them back out there, just so that they don't all come back at this point in time when there is a little bit of pushback from the consumer and prices are dropping. And I think prices will continue to drop for a little while on many models, not on all of them. As I say, the Model 3 is now looking more attractive. The Model Y probably still looks expensive. So values will have to come down on certain models a little bit more for a few weeks, I would say. But once you head into the summer, could start to get a bit of stability again.
Yeah. So, I mean, January is just a little bit of a surprise. I think, like you were saying, it could have been even higher if what happened hadn't happened. What's sort of February shaping up to be? Can we be braced for another drop in EVs, or is it just going to sort of peter out a little bit now, do you think?
I think we might see more of the same. So for petrol and diesel cars, I think we'll see more of the same. I think we'll see the consumer demand isn't just going to drop away. That's fine. That's good. It's in a good place. There aren't loads of cars coming back in. Obviously, February is a quiet month for new car registrations. So fleet returns. I mean, there might be people considering taking it early if they've been waiting for a long time. They might just think, well, I'll take it. The plate doesn't make such a big difference, but manufacturers still focus on March. So I think there will be more cars coming back in, but demand will be there. So I think retailers will be out buying petrol and diesel cars. I think we might see a small movement up again in February for ICE cars. I think electric vehicles will continue to come down. I think there's still some movement there to come on many of those models, not on all of them, but on many of them. I think there will be some more values falling, probably not to the same degree as in January, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's still some 4-figure drops.
Yeah. Well, fantastic, Derren. I look forward to catching up again next month. And there's always lots to talk about, isn't there? It's always great having these chats. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's been a strong month, but apart from EVs, that's probably the snapshot. Yeah.
Terrific. Okay, thanks, Derren. See you next month.
Thanks, James. Bye.
Well, that's it for this Car Dealer Live. Join us again very soon. Bye-bye.